Now it's not. What? All right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the July 26, 2023 meeting of the Capital Improvements Committee. Welcome. We've had our safety briefing. I'm going to, by the power of the chair, temporarily appoint Dr. Howard Hall and Ms. Connie Hall as board members and ask for a motion to approve last meeting minutes and also to approve today's agenda. Dr. Howard Hall so moves.
Second.
Ms. Hall seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. The minutes are approved and the agenda is approved as well. And with that, we'll move on to our East Bluff expenditures and budgets report, Mr. Jackson. And while he's coming up, just a comment on the agenda today. Typically, we do go through East Bluff expenditures and budgets, and then we talk about pending projects and pending M&O matters as well. But today, as we've discussed previously, we're going to focus on our continued discussions about long-range planning. I would encourage any members of the public or board members who have questions about pending projects or specific M&O issues, please reach out to the facility staff or a board member, and we can get your questions answered. And with that, Mr. Jackson, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to briefly go over a couple of slides just to concentrate on revenue so we can jump straight into the presentation from capital projects. On the slide you have in front of you for East Bluff 2, it shows the total collections of $335 million. We haven't officially closed out East Bluff 2. We still have a couple of $1 million of funds available that we're collecting interest on. So as you see in some of the other slides that's in the presentation, we are continuing to collect some income for East Bluff 2. The same thing for East Bluff 3, even though we've finished collecting tax revenue, we're still collecting interest income on the $425 million that we received from East Bluff 3. For East Bluff 4, for 17 out of 60 months, we've collected $173 million. That's through the month of May of 2023. On the next slide, it just shows in the graph of the collections by month for all four of the East Bluff phases. East Bluff 4 is the one that's up top with the orange and blue, the orange boxes. As you can see, collections have been still above the budgeted monthly amount that we anticipated. Actually, this orange line here represent the actual budgeted amount, $7.3 million that we anticipated collecting per month. But as you can see, we're way above that, and collections still remain coming in steady for the so far this year, and we anticipate it's going to be the same for the future months. And as I said before, I really want to get into the projects themselves. The next couple of slides talks a little bit about the E2 unallocated funds. Again, we're trying to finalize those over the next few months. Then we get into the budgeted costs and remaining balances in East Bluff 2, East Bluff 3, and East Bluff 4. Then we're back to just some revenue visual showings of the revenues for East Bluff 2. Again, I did point out that we're still collecting some interest. We've collected $105,000 that we will actually budget for into an allocated account. East Bluff 3, we're still receiving some capital outlay and interest income in East Bluff 3. Then in East Bluff 4, we have our regular collections of tax revenue and interest that will accumulate based upon the balances that we have in East Bluff 3 bank accounts. Again, I won't get into the projects today. We won't get into the projects expenditures today. We're just jumping to the capital projects presentations unless there are some questions.
Any questions for Mr. Jackson? I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Last year, I think January of 22 maybe. So here's my question. sometime in the last couple of years, the board voted on, approved considering issuing bonds. And I know we've got that tool in our tool belt.
Correct.
My question is, was that vote for East Blast 4?
That was for East Plus 4 projects.
Okay.
We were thinking about accelerating some of the projects in East Plus 4. However, because of the timetables and getting some of the projects started, we did not have the need to go out and get bonds for East Plus 4.
Right, but if we wanted or needed to now,
We still can.
we still can.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
And if I remember correctly, the anticipated collections for E4 were something like 7.8 or 8 million a month, and we're averaging over 10.
So
Right.
far, we're averaging between 9 and 10 per month. Again, like I said, I pointed out on this slide,
Oh, there
the
you go, sorry.
orange is actually, it's similar
That's
to where
budget.
that budget amount, 7.3, and you can see where the collections are so far for the first 5 months of the year.
Okay.
So collections are doing pretty good. Tourism is up, and it's helping us.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Jackson on budget or finances or collections? All right, thank you, sir. All right, moving on to the focus of our agenda today, continuation of our operations planning. Good morning, Ms. Miller-Kegler.
Good morning. We will probably do an update on the schedule, and then I'm gonna come forward. Just a very quick update. You can go. Yep.
Projects.
Go backwards to where we need to be.
You doing the projects too?
No, just the program schedule. There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. We will do just a quick update on the program schedule. You have that in front of you, and just as a recap, just to say that we have and show that we are or going to be working in 40 of the schools throughout the district, and we've got close to a little over 70 individual projects going. And so there is a lot of work that continues to be done. Throughout the program, we've got, let's see if I can find it here a minute. We have over $300 million of work in E3 and E4 projects ongoing right now. So we continue to have a lot of project work. When I look at the capital outlay, we have collected all of the monies in FY16 through FY19. And we are looking at finishing up in the FY20 for capital outlay. The spend plan that we have for E3 continues to show that we are going to be expending all of the dollars that we have brought in. It's important to see that at the end of this East Blas, we have completed all of the project work and all of the expected expenditures. Our E4 spend plan, we're currently in about halfway through 2023. Just note in the blue under SPLOST proceeds and kind of follow up with what Larry said. The collections have exceeded the budget, and so that continues to show in our spend plan. And again, we've got a plan in place that is going to complete this program. Projects are all coming in We're not over budget on either E3 or E4. And so everything, we won't get into details, obviously, on the individual projects themselves, but everything is on schedule, and we continue to work through the SPOS program.
Questions on schedule? Again, as noted, we're not going to get into the weeds of specific projects, but if people have questions about a specific project, please follow up with Ms. Miller-Kegler and the facilities team. Dr. Hall, Howard Hall?
Yes, this is not a specific project, but my question is the spend plan for the growth on the west side of town. Is this the time to ask that? Because I know there's continuous growth out there with possibility of another high school or an extension to Rice Creek. So I would just...
Well, that's a great segue into
I could not have paid her.
what we're going to be talking about.
I couldn't have paid her, didn't pay her, but will pay her after the meeting for my introduction this morning. So, good morning, Mr. Moss. Good morning, board members. Good morning, Dr. Watts. Thank you all for allowing us the opportunity to be able to make some modifications into how we traditionally present at CIC, because it's critical that we continue our discussion and our planning, scheduling and finalizing long-range planning. And that's exactly what the purpose is today. And a couple of the points that you just brought forward are the reasons why we made the request to be able to have the discussion relative to long-range planning. Because of the growth. We see what the growth is. We know what the growth is. We can't ignore it. And we have to put ourselves in a position where we can provide those services where we need. I'm going to share a conversation I had with Dr. Watts, if she doesn't mind. When I shared the map that's so critical to our work that we keep in front of us, I rolled it out in her office, and she looked at it, and she said, "What is that up there by itself?" And it was Rice Creek. And I said, that's where all of the growth is right now. So certainly, as a newcomer, had never seen all of our buildings together, she immediately zeroed into that. So our intent this morning is to talk about the data, provide you with the facts, provide you with the data, very similar to what we did with E4, and then have you all help us make those decisions as to how we allocate dollars, how we allocate staff, how we make sure that we get out in front of it, because we know what the needs are. That's what long-range planning is. We want to be effectively planning for the future. We have to identify the current and future facilities needs based on demographic projections, enrollment trends, educational program changes that enable us to be able to have the necessary infrastructure. We can't just get some water and some concrete and build a new school. We have to be able to fund it. We have to make sure that if we're going to do redistricting, then we're also going to be looking at how we look as a district now. Are we operating efficiently? Having schools that are at 46% of capacity consistently is inefficient. We can't operate a half of a building, a third of a building, or a quarter of a building. We bring those buildings up every morning, and we're at 46% of capacity. So how do we talk about repurposing those buildings, combining them? Nobody likes to hear us say close buildings, but if buildings are inefficient, then we're not being good stewards of taxpayer dollars, and we're not being good stewards of capital projects by not bringing that data in front of you. So you'll get an opportunity to work with us collaboratively as to how we position this district moving forward, how we allocate those resources, how do we maintain and upkeep those buildings. We have buildings that are 50 years old. When a building reaches 30 years, then some of the systems are starting to fail. They've outlived their useful life. HVAC systems. Critical systems have to be replaced, so we need to be able to start looking seriously at our deferred maintenance budget. What are those educational needs? We have to make sure that we are aligning those buildings with the educational needs, and that is critical to our work as well. Safety is certainly at the forefront. making sure that those buildings are safe, not only for staff, but for students, but for the community as well. Then that community engagement is going to be critical. Making sure that your stakeholders understand when we start talking about repurposing, combining, and possibly putting in place a cycle of closure. That is a cycle of closure. Why would we recommend closing a building? Because if the building has been inefficient, if it's not operating effectively, then those are the mechanisms that we consider. Then we have to make sure that we're being environmentally stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. What about sustainability and how we're integrating that into our buildings and into our program? So this is a big piece for us, but it's a necessary piece and it's an effective piece. Bill talked a little bit about the number of projects we have. So you see a lot of folks in the audience this morning because I don't think that you've had a chance to be introduced to some of the new players that we have on the team. These guys and these ladies work literally 7 days a week. And it's important that you see the team. It's a small team for what they produce. Bill told you the dollar amount that's active out there. He told you the number of projects that are active. And some of them are missing because they called us one and said, look, I just can't come. And I said, no, I want you on your project. I need you in your meeting. But wanted you to be able to have an opportunity to take a quick look. So if you can stand up so they can see the folks that's out there that's making it happen on a daily basis. Look at the number of people you see. Bill told you about the $300 million. He told you the 70 active projects. So this team is working daily to make sure that we are providing a first-class education. So
Ms. Miller-Kegler, you were reading our minds because Ms. Hall and I were just talking about who are all these people in the audience. And we recognize many, but if y'all could quickly just give us your name.
Yeah, please.
And we know some of you, but it's good to see some of you again, some of you we haven't seen before. Just quickly give us your name and your title, and your zodiac sign and what you all that. No, Roger? No? Okay.
No.
Just give us your name and title real quick. We appreciate you. We appreciate you being here.
We'll start with Slade up here. Back.
Slade Delmy, project executive out at the GMG company.
Don't be shy.
Yeah.
David Scott, project engineer. Doug Jones, senior project manager of the EV, the Gotham Station.
Good morning, Tammy Perkins Scarborough, lead director of transportation.
Good morning, Neva Jen, business data analyst, capital projects.
Good morning, Nicole Callahan, senior project manager.
James May, assistant chief operations officer.
Ross Kennedy, I'm out at the project manager for the Groves and the movie desk.
Thank you all for being here.
The team over here at the table that keeps this team here together.
Good morning, Jada Williams, Executive Secretary. Good morning, Evita Banks, Facilities Contract.
And you know
Mr.
Bill,
Cashmore.
Sonny. Stand up, Sonny. Tell them what you do. A little bit of everything.
Ashok Sani Batra, I do project controls with all these guys together.
Yeah. So if you want some numbers recrunched and redone, you call Davita. If I need to know how many folks we have, you call Davita and she press a button and get it done for us. So this is a mighty team. Sylvester didn't stand up. All of you know Sylvester who works with us as well. And this is not all of them, but Drayvon couldn't be here. He has a project. He's doing all of those turf fields that we're trying to get ready for the start of school. So I talked with him on the drive-in and said, no, I need you to take care of something, and that's where he is. So this is just a portion of them. It's a few of them. We need some more as we get ready to bring some more projects online because this team is stretched thin right now.
And Mr. Chair, I would be remiss if I didn't introduce the finance team. I don't want to get beat up when I get back to the office. So if I can have them to stand and introduce themselves.
Absolutely.
Good morning, I'm Rosalind Nathaniel, I'm the assistant chief financial officer.
I'm Grace Cecilia, I'm the controller. Rose Ray Bain, I'm the senior accountant.
Sabrina Scales, senior director of purchasing.
Thank you.
Okay, so
And we noticed most of you had more than one title. which means you're wearing many hats, and the other duties as assigned is probably your most prominent job duty. But on behalf of the board, we thank you for your dedication every day and your efforts, and we do appreciate it. We hear from people inside and outside of the county how well our facilities program runs, and I know it's probably chaos from time to time behind the curtain. That's normal, but in front of the curtain, y'all do a great job representing the county and the district well, and so thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, because you all get to come when we have the groundbreaking and you're back when it's time for the ribbon cutting. But that's the team that's doing the work in between that particular piece. They're good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. They are a committed group. Darryl is on professional leave. I think he's due back in the district tomorrow. Like I said, Drayvon is out working on a turf field. You never know what's under the grass until you get your report back. So we're working on some of those. So again, thank you. So back to where we are, and I do have two of my consultants is going to work with us this morning on this particular project. We have Simi. You've met Simi. You've met Sam before. So we've been working Saturday, Sunday, and that 8th day of the week to get all of this data together for you, because it is important. It is critical. And we're going to go ahead and get started. Talked a little bit about why, and that's important, the why. We are at a point where there are some projects we're going to have to prioritize. There are some that are date sensitive. We've been notified by the Department of Justice as it relates to GNET. We relocated 100 students out of coastal Georgia as a part of the Jenkins renovation, but now we're being mandated to integrate all students into schools. So we're looking at the number of students that remain in that building and how we can integrate them to meet that timeline that we have. We're going to do our very best. I can't go build a new wing immediately, but certainly we can look at some of those buildings that we can right-size and be able to have that population there. We have to look at and prioritize our need for Coastal Montessori. We know what their date is to be able to have a building. You'll hear us talk about what their needs are. They're clearly outlined in our work that we'll be discussing with you today. What their current enrollment is, what they want to be able to see for future growth. So we'll see that as well. What we also had an opportunity to do is go back to each of our cabinet members, to academic affairs, to campus police, technology. Each and every department was required to stretch themselves. Some things will come up after we complete the plan. But certainly that what you know that your needs are, what you're seeing now that we need to put on the table is now what you're going to see. Where we are with technologies, where we are with records management, where we are with professional learning. How can we make sure that we're delivering those services, and how we can make sure that the buildings we have. In your data, you're going to see how much land you own and what the value of all of that land. It's pretty impressive. We have a very impressive portfolio, but are we using it efficiently? So those are the key points that we're going to be working through, digging down in that data. This isn't going to be your first opportunity. Mr. Katchmar will tell you a little bit about what your homework is going to be, very similar to what we did with E4. Coming back at your next retreat, we'll have an opportunity to then provide some additional information. We're giving you a lot of data points. We're giving you what is our utility spend on a building that's 46% of capacity. Where are we in terms of a flood zone? Do we want to continue to build there, renovate there? Then how we're going to plan for the growth in Western Chatham County. That's what we're seeing growth now. But if you drive down MLK, if you drive down Montgomery Street, you see 5- and 6-story complexes coming up. If you drive down President Street, you see 12-story complexes going up. There will be children there. May not be a lot, but we can't say that I'm going to close this school or combine this school without projecting without looking at the demographics, without looking at growth around the entire county. And that's what we're going to be doing, is giving you some of those data points this morning. We'll be continuing our conversations with academic affairs as one of those priorities. We'll be continuing our conversations with Simcoe as to what their needs are. But what the critical piece is taking a look at all of those needs and being able to come up with a plan, come up with a schedule, prioritize, and certainly collaborating with our stakeholders and our community partners as well. So I'm going to ask Simi to join me now. I kind of talked through most of this. Like I said, we've been working on this 8 days a week, but she's going to actually take you through how we've actually had an opportunity to look at the needs for student programming, the needs for academic programming, that for administration. All of those categories are what you're going to see. We're going to talk about the data, and then we're going to talk about how we're going to continue to plan. So again, thank you for the introduction. We are looking at what's available, how we plan for that, have land actually at Rice Creek. Thank you for the introduction about barn. So we do we look at, can we go ahead and possibly add on to Rice Creek? Just like we're doing with Godley Station now, which we probably should have managed in E1, but it's certainly in E4. That's an ongoing, I don't always win when we come to the table with recommendations, but we are adding on to Godley Station because that's where we see the growth. That design was completed for growth. So now we're taking advantage of that and adding wings on so we can get those babies out of modulars. Our desire is to always have a permanent structure. So we're paying attention, we're looking, we have the data, and now we want your support and us working together collaboratively as to how we can plan and how we can budget for that. So I'm going to bring Simi forward. She's going to take you through what each of the areas said that they had a need for. You have a chance to review some of it. Some of it is going to probably fall off the table. Some of it will be prioritized high, and then that's how we're going to continue our work. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Miller-Kegler, and good morning. What we did as a part of this process was to make sure that we heard from key departments within the school district to know what both their long-term and short-term priority needs were in two areas. The first was in terms of student programming, and the second was in terms of administrative space. So on the slide that you see now, you see we have starting with school nutrition, academic affairs, data and accountability, career technical and agricultural education, and the Coastal Empire Montessori Charter School. And you see for each of those areas, school nutrition had long-term needs, some of which are already being addressed with some of the projects that are underway for school renovations. Then under academic affairs, you see there, and I won't read this to you, but I'll just let you know what you're looking at. So they've identified needs for relocation of programs, restructuring of programs, specifically GNETs that Ms. Miller-Kegler mentioned a moment ago. Looking at having increased record storage space, other locations for testing materials, and expansion of the Tech Support Center. Under CTAE, they are looking at renovation and upgrades for the specific areas that you see listed. And also, as also was mentioned earlier with Coastal Empire Montessori Charter, currently they are in a cluster of relocatables, and so they are looking for a space located near maybe an existing charter, and then also space to expand. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in another slide. Okay.
Ms. Grabowski?
I just had a quick question.
Sure.
At one point, under school nutrition, I was thinking that there was discussion about a centralized kitchen. Is that still something on the radar? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to click all these so they'll come in. So a little more detail around the needs for student programs. Currently, the Building Bridges alternative program for middle school is slated to remain at Woodville Tompkins Middle. The Savannah Chatham E-Learning Academy proposed to relocate at possibly Old Mercer Middle. The Fresh Start alternative program for elementary needs a spot to be relocated. The Acorn preschool program for 3-year-olds They're currently located at Formy, but space is slated to be made available at elementary sites across the district, including the schools you see listed there, so that those programs can be in neighborhood schools. The CTAE training kitchen and meeting space looking to remain at Woodville Tompkins High and Savannah High. Data and accountability looking to the need for building training and testing labs. GNETs, as was mentioned earlier, there is a model that is happening now at Jenkins High School that needs to be replicated in sites across the district that are yet to be determined for elementary and middle grade students. Athletics, looking to obtain a facility that will accommodate athletic tournaments as well as a facility that will host the annual graduation ceremonies for high schools. And then for the Coastal Empire Montessori Charter, they currently have an enrollment of 208, but they have a target growth of 400 students in grades K through 5. So they need additional space for pre-K classes, space to better accommodate their Montessori program, outdoor space, as well as access to gym, cafeteria, office and conference spaces. And CEMS is willing to relocate the preschool classes to another school campus until additional space is located, but ultimately with the goal of having pre-K be a part of their current K-5 complex. Then the second area that we dove into was looking at the needs for administrative space, and you see the departments that are listed there. So with maintenance and operation, they hope to expand and renovate point-of-use storage facilities. With school nutrition, looking for more workspace away from the front office, as well as a training kitchen and meeting space. Transportation is looking to have a parking facility for 130 buses, adequate staff parking, adequate storage for additional fleet parts and materials, and a charging station for 50 electronic buses. On the long term, a central transportation facility for school buses, administrative staff, fleet service, and training support. Finance, looking long-term for a comfortable, safe environment for their offices. For data and accountability, they're looking for working and conference room spaces, as well as labs for testing and training. And the data center needs an upgrade for a generator for an independent AC unit for the technology equipment. And again, also long-term, safe, secure, functional workspaces. Long-term for the academic affairs, communications, human resources, and campus police. For academic affairs to relocate to a building that's close to the Bull Street location that can house the entire academic affairs in one location. Communications is looking for office space configurations for a standalone production booth as well as additional storage. Human Resources has identified the need to have human resources and professional learning in a shared space. And then for campus police, perimeter fencing and gates at all schools and facilities. And also additional security precautions, which because they are security precautions, they are not public information, but that details can be provided under separate cover for that. So we went into a little deeper dive around the need for administrative space. One of the things, as you recall, when we presented back in February, was a conversation around the location or possible relocation of central office. There you see that its condition score is a 48.52, which indicates that it is poor. And you also see that it celebrated its 101st birthday this year. So it was built in 1902. So part of our rationale for relocation would be that you are very landlocked. The building is over 100 years old and has been is in poor condition. There's over $13 million in deferred maintenance costs with a replacement cost of $26 million. And with the age of the building comes limited handicap accessibility to the main entrances, limited parking, and there is not sufficient space to house the majority of central offices. Points for consideration is to relocate a portion to a neighboring school site looking at available land in the area that will be compatible to the needs of a central office and sufficient for the construction of a multi-story facility. In other words, the zoning would allow for a multi-story building to be built on that site. The new building would have extended parking, full ADA access, other mechanical and technology advantages that come with new construction, and also, again, as Ms. Miller-Kegler mentioned earlier, the opportunity to run more efficiently in terms of energy and maintenance costs. In looking at which offices would be housed in those new offices, the focus was around, one, making sure that those that are heavily utilized by both external and internal stakeholders would be housed there, and also those operations, those departments whose operations frequently intersect. So some examples would be human resources, finance and payroll, professional learning, student services, and academic affairs. For the current Bull Street location, there are considerations for which offices should remain. So noting that if offices remain, there still needs to be significant renovations to the facility based on the poor condition score. But as one of the largest employers in the county, the current location should continue to house the CEO of the district, i.e. the superintendent and board offices. Additional offices that might be retained at the current location would need to be determined which other offices might be there. Another advantage of your current location is that it has a high value commercially, and having a portion of the building having offices move out to a new location would open up the opportunity for private partnerships with that location, including retail. There are lots of nearby restaurant, shopping, and other businesses that create a lot of foot traffic, and that would give lease income opportunities for that building. This building, the Whitney Administrative Complex, again, it was built in 1953, so it's 70 years old. It also has a poor condition score. Currently, the building houses the district print shop, the board meeting room, professional learning, and student records storage. So if this property were sold, it would provide revenue that could be used for other purchases or renovations. And if the property is sold, then the operations that are current and offices that are currently housed here would need to be relocated. So this is just a list of projects that are underway in terms of renovations, in terms of roof replacements, and school rebuilds. And so you just see the list here, and I'll just let you look at that for a moment, and I'll go on to the next slide.
Question real quick.
Sure.
So appreciate the summary from all the departments and the input from all of the departments. One question is from a data storage and record storage perspective, is there a period of time that we're required by law to store records? And then is there a long-term plan to digitize everything, to keep everything in the cloud moving forward, and keep our paper records until the storage requirements expire? Or are we going to digitize paper records? What's our long-term data plan?
All right, to address your question as far as paper records, by law, Georgia law, we're required to maintain those paper records permanently. They do not expire. We cannot destroy them. We can digitize them, and we have been digitizing them. All the employee records are digitized, so we do have an online system where we scan everything. We still have, obviously, from inception, the first student record we have, those have not been digitized. They've been put on microfiche. So we have a lot of microfiche records that we keep on site, but we still have a lot of paper records. We have not contracted out. We've been looking at how we can go through those records to see how best to efficiently scan them and put them in the system, because you're talking about paper that has been sitting in a folder for decades.
And what are our current data gathering and management practices now with student records? Are they still paper, or are they all digital? Are we creating more paper that we have to keep for forever?
It is a combination of both. The schools do create jackets or student jackets within the schools that they keep on the students. All that information is also in our PowerSchool system. So when a parent registers, everything is scanned in and maintained online. But the school still print some information is still kept in a student jacket.
And do we store all of our paper records on our property, or do we pay for storage somewhere?
All the records are either maintained at the school if they're active. If they're inactive, they come here to the Whitney Center.
Okay, and then one more question, and I don't know why I'm so into data management today. What's our current capacity, or how much capacity do we have left? In other words, do we have to find another 100,000 square feet of storage as part of our planning, or are we comfortable we have capacity for the next 20 years at least, long after I'm off this board?
Capacity has been an issue. We have explored using or partnering with the Chatham County because they have a storage facility, state-of-the-art record storage facility, and they charge per record box. We've also looked at expanding internally because we have reached that limit, and we have been creeping into classrooms here at Whitney in order to accommodate the overflow of records that are coming in from the schools, because we don't want the schools to then be over capacity on those records.
Thank you. Ms. Hall?
Good morning. This report is wonderful. I want to go back to the student programming for a second. If I asked all the board members today to meet me for lunch at the Building Bridges High facility on Hopkins Street, which is adjacent to their office on their side of the building, due to Mr. Bozeman's efforts, things look good, livable, a nice place to work. But on the half of that building that contains Building Bridges High, it's abominable. And I'm surprised to see that that's not listed under academic affairs as a high priority. So I'd like your team to please reconsider, take a look over there. I don't know who the associate is over that facility, but I have been there, and it's not a place that's conducive to learning.
Okay. We'll certainly take a look at that and determine what modifications we can make immediately over there. Thank you. And as in response to the records management piece, you can see how the building, what the rating of the building is when this building was built. We've replaced canopies on this building twice. As if you remember, this was the previous Spencer Elementary School, but we've turned it into an administrative complex. But certainly, this is one of those buildings that we're going to have to make decisions about. Do we reinvest dollars in this building, or do we look at some other alternatives and have a state-of-the-art records management facilities? We also house our professional learning operations here too. So records management has outgrown the area where they are, and as Mr. Feliciano mentioned, they are moving into classrooms now, and that is very concerning. And as Simi gets ready to move into the next piece, what we're going to make sure that we do is you understand the FCI, and not only you all, but you've heard it before, but our attendees, our public, our stakeholders, how we rate a building. Because I don't want anybody to become alarmed when they say, well, oh, I'm working in a building that's poor, or I'm working in a building that's not safe. That's not the case. We're going to break it down for you and explain to you exactly what good, fair, poor, and satisfactory means. And oftentimes when we look at those ratings and what compose those, sometimes, again, like I said, the HVAC system, some of the other systems have reached their useful life, which then puts them in that category. Under no circumstances will we have student and staff operating out of a building where there are life safety concerns. We are mandated to make sure that those are taken care of immediately. So as we get to that piece, it's important that you understand what those ratings, what comprise and compose those ratings as well.
Right, exactly. Thank you.
Dr. Howard Hall?
Yes.
Is the parking facility at Port Wentworth temporary, or will that be long-term?
That's probably going to be long-term until we can find suitable parking for buses. As you're aware, we had a park out on Chatham Parkway. We're paying about $8,000 a month. The property was sold. The new owner, the amount went to $60,000 a month, from $8,000 to $60,000. So we looked at in our inventory quickly where we could park. So we've looked at several options as to how we can relocate and move the buses, because some of them, the way they're parked, it's right behind a lot of the housing areas. We looked at, are we going to cement it over near where Georgia Ports has containers on that side that's away. So there's a couple of plans. Then we were looking at gravel, which became very difficult for us to acquire it because of the small amount. So that is an open project. We want to be able to use that and not have to always rent space. We are having some renovations completed over at the interchange court. Then we're looking at next steps for the Gamble Road step. Then some of the buses over there need to be cycled out based on the age and condition of them. But we're looking, and we've been trying to keep, City of Port Wentworth updated as to where we are. And we'll get you another update as to where we are. Okay.
Thank you. So over the next several pages, you're going to see all of the school facilities as well as administrative facilities listed out with the information that you see on the screen. We've provided for each facility the age of the facility, the condition, which is the FCI scores. For schools, we have provided the educational suitability, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. The utilization rates for schools, current utility costs. Again, those are, you'll see data on there for schools, the cost of deferred maintenance, and the cost of the facility replacement. So the first sorting of your schools is by FCI score, and you see we have it color-coded there. Green is good, and typically you're going to see green for schools that are newly constructed. Schools that have had a full renovation will tend to get a good score, and it's in overall good physical condition with 15% or less of the value of the building systems needing repair or replacement. Building systems such as HVAC, roofs, and so forth. Fair, 15 to 30% of the value of the systems need repair or replacement. Poor, 30 to 50% of the systems are needed repair. Unsatisfactory, 50% or more of the systems are in need of repair. And again, just as Ms. Miller-Kegler said, this is not, oh my gosh, we're in an unsafe building. It's just that that building has reached the end of its life cycle for the systems, and those systems need to be repaired or replaced. So what we've done here is you see the first sorting is by condition ratings. So you have the name of the school, the year, the age, the size of the building, total deferred maintenance costs, and total replacement costs. And then that first score color column is FCI. And so they are sorted from the schools that have the highest FCI scores to the schools that have the lowest. And so you see the schools on this page, and I'll just give you a moment to go through and look at that. Then on this page, you see the scores that are rated as poor, and you see the scores, the 7 scores that are rated as unsatisfactory. Then on the following slide, we have the ratings for the other non-instructional spaces. Oatland Island, the Port Wentworth, Massey Heritage, Coastal Georgia, the central office. this building, the maintenance building, and Woodville Tompkins Lower. You can see the Oatland Island is good. The rest of the facilities that we assessed were either poor or unsatisfactory.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Is this every facility the district owns, takes care of, manages, et cetera?
Every facility that we have in our inventory, because as you see, we even have Thunderbolt listed, the swing site listed. So, and then you also should see a listing from the tax assessor's office. Is that one, did that one make the presentation? Okay, I'll pull that one up. So we did our due diligence by looking at your entire, like I said, your entire portfolio. We'll get that to you if it did not make this presentation before it was transmitted. But we have all of the land that you own, the actual acreage, and the value of it, because we want to be able to take a look at everything as a part of this long-range plan when we're making some decisions. So I'll make sure I'm making notes of what I need to get to you, and that's one if it's not in here. Then there's an additional map that has all of your land, has all of your schools, have your capacity on the map. So when you start your work, all of that's going to be in front of you. I want to think at the last retreat, that was one of the questions that you brought forward, Mrs. Grabowski. So we've modified the maps to give you as much data as we possibly could include on that.
Thank you.
And those are the maps.
Yeah, those are the maps, and you should have one in front of you as well.
Yes. Okay. All right. So the next sort of the facilities is by educational suitability score. Educational suitability, simply stated, looks at the extent to which the building meets and supports the demands of the programs in that building. The factors that are used to create the score, we look at the overall environment. We look at circulation, in other words, how students are able to move through the building. Is there space available for support services such as guidance, occupation and physical therapy? We look at the size of the spaces, so there are educational specifications for the size of each type of space: general classrooms, science labs, the gymnasium. The location, and with location, what we're looking for is to make sure that noisy spaces are not adjacent to quiet spaces, if you will. So in other words, there aren't English classes located right next to the gym. And then finally, we look at if there is adequate storage for equipment and materials and fixed equipment. So, and again, appropriate to the space. So if we have a band room, is there storage for the instruments and so forth? So again, the ratings here go from the darker green, which is excellent. There may be some suitability or functionality issues, but it's very minor. Then to the lighter green is good. It's supporting the majority of the program. And again, there may be a few more minor issues. Then yellow is the fair. So they are having some problems in one or more of those factors that I just described. Poor, there are a number of problems in terms of having adequacy in the areas that I just listed, and then unsatisfactory, a score below 60. It's unsuitable overall to support the educational programs that are being housed in that building. So if you go over next to FCI, you'll see ed suitability. There were spaces that were not available for us to assess at the time that we were here, and then you see the green starts with A.B. Williams and Haven Elementary with the dark green. And as I said, you'll typically see that in your newer buildings, and so you see those are relatively new buildings. And then the remaining schools on this page are all in the good range. The first three schools on the next page are all in the good. Then you have a swath of schools that are in the fair, and you have two that are in the poor, and two that are in the unsatisfactory.
Let me ask a question about
Sure.
the data. FCI score is based on your team's assessment of the facility and its systems at a date in time, right?
Right.
And that was last year?
Yeah, fall, yes, of last year.
Fall of 23. 22. Fall of 22.
Yeah.
Education suitability is comparing the school to a set of metrics. Okay. The utilization rate, is that based on enrollment as of 22, or is it enrollment trends over 5 years?
Current,
So it's based on, okay.
right.
Do we have multi-year enrollment data, right?
We do.
Yeah, because part of the challenge is many of these schools had higher enrollment, and then we had COVID, and lots of parents said, y'all are delaying opening, other schools are, I think we've lost some kids to private schools, but there's a new generation of younger children coming in. So for some of these schools, I think enrollment's going to go up.
Yeah.
For others, they've been at 70% or 90% or 60% for a decade. And I think we have to differentiate between those schools as well.
Right.
So I'm just trying to understand the data.
Yeah.
Right.
And for this part, go ahead, Dr. Wise.
I was just going to say, I've asked the team to look at future enrollment as a consideration, because we wouldn't want to take an action now and then 5 to 7 years from now, that action no longer makes sense.
Sure.
And what we look at, and traditionally, my working document is 5 years. I have 5 years of previous enrollment and capacity utilization in a building. And then we have some also, as Dr. Watts stated, some projected numbers, just as in my introduction. We can't turn a blind eye to what's happening on Montgomery and Henry and Anderson and MLK and on President Street, while the enrollment may be low now. And if you go down Wheaton and East Broad, where they've taken a parking lot, not the building, but the parking lot, and there's a 6-story apartment complex that's almost completed, literally in the parking lot of Forming. There will be children there. So we have to do our due diligence, continue to look at where those building permits are coming up. We get that data from the city, from the county, from Port Wentworth, from Garden City, and look at some projections. And that was one of the conversations that we've had, is that we cannot make informed decisions without those data points, because there's growth right now in Western Chatham County, but then we see all of the building that's happening in the downtown area and where you traditionally kind of see those clusters of schools. I know the city, there was some conversation about where the fairground was, about possibly having affordable housing there. So we've consistently seen Haven at that 50% capacity, at utilization. But if they're going to build there, if that is the final decision, we have to pay attention to that. We can't come back and say, well, oh, now that students are here, certainly we can do some redistricting, but we need to make those informed decisions. So you're correct.
Ms. Grabowski?
Thank you. I have one detailed question, then another comment piggybacking on Mr. Katchmark. Could you go back one slide, please? Jenkins, our brand-new school, do we know why the educational suitability was not higher for that facility?
They don't have a full stadium complex for athletics.
I will take that one today.
Yeah.
I'll take it. I got it.
I'll need to take down that question and go back
Okay.
into the full report to see what that score represents.
That's a little
Yeah.
disconcerting. And then my other question, kind of piggybacking on looking, I agree 100% that we need to look at trends and not just a snapshot when we're looking at the our schools. And the other thing I think would be interesting to look at is how our enrollments changed in schools where we modified the academic programs. Because I think historically, when we had some underperforming schools and they were then, the curriculum was revamped and they became, part of our choice school system, we saw those populations increase, I believe, probably substantially. So I think we have to look at the academic side, and some of these underperforming schools, are there So are there things that we need to look at on the academic side to help bring those numbers back, bring those students back, to be able to further increase the utilization of those schools?
Thank you.
Ms. Hall?
One of the wonderful things about all the buildings we have built recently is that neighborhoods tell us how wonderful our being there and our buildings, how much they begin to accelerate other construction that's going to uplift the neighborhood. So just looking at A.B. Williams on Wheaton Street, that seems to be encouraging a flurry of other wonderful activity. I see that Campus Police, and they're my best friends, Campus Police, but I see that they're interested in fencing all of our schools. If we're going to spend the money and the fencing is going to be the beautiful, looks like wrought iron fencing around our schools that's going to enhance our landscapes, I'd be 100% for it. But I am not for chain linking our schools. For instance, the way Myers is right now, that needs to change. And I've already talked to Ms. Kegler, and she's going to see that that changes. We can't have our schools looking prison-like. And that's what chain link fencing does. So as we move forward, I want to say this now so it's not too late to say it later. Please, no chain link fencing around our schools. And if we have to fence for security, then let's go high grade and get the kind of fencing that will only enhance the landscape so it looks like, you know, a mansion behind a beautifully appointed estate, not like, you know, is this a prison? Thank you.
Maybe we can put that in the design guidelines, Ms. Hall.
Yeah, but I'm talking about all the...
It's just money.
Yeah,
A lot of money.
Not only is it money, but yes, it's our identity and
I
our
hear you.
presence.
I hear you.
And we're an educational institution, yes.
The last list of sorting of the schools is by utilization rate. So the key, the color key here is in the red means there's inadequate space. In other words, the building is at over 110% utilization. Approaching inadequate are your schools that are between 95% and 110% utilization. Adequate, between 80 and 95%, and then approaching inefficient use of the space, 70 to 80%, and then anything that is below 70% is considered an inefficient space. So that last column right before your utility costs is where we have sorted the schools from the ones that are at the highest level of utilization. And I'll point to that number next to it. It's functional capacity, meaning functionally how many students can that school support. So, for example, at Groves, you have a 925 student functional capacity, and they're at 117% utilization. And so you see the color coding here. We have from overutilization to approaching excess utilization to at with the green. And on the next page, you see those schools in the goldenrod that are approaching inefficient, and in the pink, those schools that are inefficient, meaning they are below 70% utilization. And then I didn't flag earlier, but in each page, that last column is the utilization cost year to date for this current school year. Or I guess we're already July 1, so the 22-23 school year.
A question, sorry,
Yes.
real quickly. So in addition to my question about Jenkins, I missed New Hampstead K-8, so if we can look at that one too. But it makes me think about the conversation that we had at our retreat when we had looked at this information previously, that At that point, we had not necessarily taken into account, we were using larger educational standards, and we had not necessarily taken into account some of our own district standards. So for example, we might want smaller class sizes, and so it skews our numbers artificially.
Right.
Have we right-sized this to our district specifically in this data presentation?
Yeah.
Specifically, I know we had the question was some of the choice programs, some of those choice schools that showed that there was a significant availability in there. So each of those schools had to be analyzed based on the services that they provide and the programs that they provide. Because when you look at a Woodville Tompkins that has a culinary kitchen, has a salon, has all of those specific areas, which is not one instructional unit, the square footage of those are larger. So we went back and did an individual evaluation of those buildings. And I'm not sure if it's on one of those slides, but we took and we listed all of the choice, and you'll see that there's a star or a diamond beside it that gives you the new utilization of those buildings.
Yeah, I lost that column when I had to add
Okay.
utilization, but I can put it back
But
in.
exactly,
Yeah.
but
To
we
me,
did.
that's the most important column, because that really speaks truly to how we're using our buildings.
Right, and what we'll do is, once we
put
get
that in.
you your matrix with your working document, you'll be able to see all of the specifics of it. Behind it, you'll have a legend to tell you what we're providing, but we was very deliberate in making sure that each of those buildings, especially the choice, because that's where we saw some variation on those numbers, but that has been corrected.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
So, and I'm taking notes as we go, so we'll make sure that we get you that particular chart that shows you this is a choice program, this is how they're configured. Because when you go into a Savannah Arts, just like Woodville Tompkins would be different, certainly there's a difference between how the building is used in a Savannah Arts and an Arts Academy.
Right, and
How,
we have
how in
other
STEM,
facilities.
when we
Yeah.
created the labs, when we converted Bartlett to a STEM academy, we had to make sure that there were specific labs there, which may have required what was all known then as 2 classrooms, but now it is a lab. So we did do that work.
Okay.
So I'll make a note, add that to my
Right.
list, that we need to make
Right.
sure that those data points are in your working document.
Okay,
Right.
that'd be very helpful. And again, I think that points to the opportunities for us to look at the academic side in combination with our building side and see where we have opportunities like that. Thank you.
Thank you. And then just, I won't belabor the next series of slides because you have a blown-up, better version of this map. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just looking at this, and
Go back.
it's exciting to know that the Groves High and Gould utilization rate will change because, with GMC coming, so I'm looking forward for that to change. And I'm sitting here laughing at myself because I was on the first staff at Georgetown in 1993. I think I was into my 10th year teaching, and now I look at it and see that the FCI is poor. I said, that's similar to my weight goals. So I guess I'm aging along with the school.
I have no comment. All right. So you have a hard copy of a map that's even more enhanced than the one that you see here. Also in your packet, we just have the maps broken down by individual districts. Those particular maps the color coding is only for conditions. That's FCI only on the ones that are showing our schools divided into their various districts. And then this is in here, the land values, so we have all properties that are owned by the district that lists their physical address, the land value, the building value, the size, and the year built. So you have, that's starting on page 79 and page 80.
And those are from the tax
81.
assessor's office?
Yes.
Yeah, and looking at this, there is some actual land that's not included on this report. I think what we have are the schools.
School buildings.
My report has land that's over on this corner of a building, on that corner of a building, so I'm gonna shoot that over to you.
Right.
So
Yeah,
we
we need that
actually
as
pulled
well.
it down, and I think it's one of the most recent reports that's on their website. I think we kind of took this one and mirrored it and put the schools up there, but you'll be able to see where we have land in some areas as well.
Also have a number of properties where we have shared use facilities, particularly with the city of Savannah. That information might be helpful as well as we're going through this
Yeah, I
exercise.
think my report is comprehensive, and I'll go ahead and get that pulled.
Thank you.
Then in the next set of slides, you have some overall population projections with here in Chatham, in the Savannah metro area, Georgia, and the nation, just by way of a 10-year population projection and the change there. Then we look specifically at population projections, and the point to note that the traditional school age of children in the K-2 through 12, those age cohorts ranging from 5 to 19 will collectively increase by about 2,800 people, with a majority coming from the ages of 10 to 19, so your upper elementary, middle, high. Overall, other cohorts possibly will see a decrease, but only of about 1% in your early grades. And that group will make up a little under 20%, 18.17% of the total population in the Savannah metro area by 2032. And this is an interesting map that we pull from the city has a building permit tracker, and as was said earlier, when you look at where a tremendous amount of growth in terms of construction, the blue circles are commercial building permits, and this was pulled about a week ago, so this is as current as we have, and then the green are showing residential. So under the state approved for commercial, you have 31 properties that are approved. For commercial, you have 48 that are approved as of this date for the residential, but you see the number of permits that have been asked for. So lots of requests to build
And
in
that's
Savannah.
just city.
That's just city.
There's a lot going on in the county.
Yeah.
We don't have to get into specifics now, but on page 82, where we're showing that the projected population of Savannah Chatham County is only going to grow by 1,600 people in a decade, that doesn't seem right.
Okay. We will check that.
It's one data point we can consider. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Okay. And next steps. Okay. That's it. Mhm.
So we kind of, for me, started at the beginning talking about what our next steps, where we're going to go, and I'm going to yield to Mr. Ketchmar. Also to talk about how we're going to continue to get the data to you, what we'll be working towards and looking for doing our upcoming retreat, feedback from you, input, and then allow us an opportunity to start putting that information together. So when we get there, we'll be putting together some schedules, some timelines, true next steps, school collaboration, community. I mean, by policy mandate, we have to have a long-range plan, not just by policy, but it is operating efficiently to have a long-range plan. How we plan, how we allocate dollars. And in operations, we're already talking about what will next year budget look like. You know, if we're talking about a rollback, if we're talking about the budget, how is that going to impact us, and how do we do our work to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars now, not when we get to that point. We're looking at ourselves. We're doing a self-examination because we manage the properties. We help manage the efficiency of the overall district. So we're challenging and stretching ourselves as a part of this process and being able to bring the data and information to you as the policymakers to help us look at where our district is, how we can be more efficient, but making sure that we're delivering first-class education. One person didn't stand up. I don't know, because she's not on the project team. She made the decision not to. But I want to be able to introduce Annette Wynn to us. She's our new executive director in operations. Maybe she thought Mr. Ketchmar was going to talk to her about the P3. But this is Annette Wynn, and yes, she'll be your contact person. So that's probably why she didn't stand up. But certainly where we go from here is important. It's critical work. It's needed work, and we're dedicating ourselves and our time to work on it. We'll be getting a matrix to you to help you guide you through your work, getting the data and additional numbers that you see, very similar to what you did with East 4. You had a matrix, you had a document, you had all of the projects, projections, you had the dollars, and then we had you help us make some of those decisions as to where we are. Okay, so I'll yield back to Mr. Catchmark.
Ms. Miller-Kegler, thank you, and to the team here today and our consultants. There was a lot of work put in behind the numbers and behind the slides we saw today. We appreciate the efforts. We appreciate the ongoing efforts on managing the panoply of projects that we've got going on, particularly with school beginning like now, this week and next week. In terms of long-term planning, so historically, we've been talking about updating our long-term plan for a while. A key component of that was our facilities condition index. We have that. I know Dr. Watts is new and is our lead learner for the first 100 days. From a takeaway perspective, what I would ask is if Dr. Watts and our facilities team, let's come up with a timeline, a goal for having a draft long-term plan in place, so then we can begin discussing it. I like setting deadlines for me because then I have something to work towards. If it's just some amorphous, I got to get it done, it falls below many other things. And I think from a board perspective, we should have a plan in place. I think we need to, for budget purposes, but also for planning purposes. I think we're already behind on West Side planning because whatever we decide today, isn't going to open up for 6 years. And initially, there were some recommendations on building closures and land sales, and then those were revised. I still think there's a way to do long-term planning, manage the ebb and flow of population trends, but also cut down on our total square footage under management. Just quick math, one of the data points that Ms. Miller-Kegler and I always like communicating to the community, especially when we're selling East Blost, is our utility cost per square footage. And our new facilities, like New Hampstead, for example, high school, which is not that new anymore, but our average square foot utility cost is 1.45. Some of our older buildings, they're over 3. And so if we can reimagine our footprint while also reducing our inventory of schools and land that cost a lot more, while also planning for the future, I think that's one of our main goals. So I think we're going to have, this is going to be an agenda item as part of our retreat. We're also going to get some homework from Ms. Miller-Kegler's team. So board members here and board members looking later, please be diligent about reviewing the data, filling out the matrices, doing your homework. Submit questions to facilities, and if we get a lot of them, maybe we'll just do an FAQ handout at some point so everybody can see the answers. And then Dr. Watts and Ms. Miller-Kegler, if we can work on a tentative timeline for a goal of having a facilities plan in place that's reasonable so that we can manage all of our other work as well. But maybe we can figure that out in the next few months as well, and we can keep moving forward. Ms. Miller-Kegler?
And I have a question, and we talked about it as a part of the team and a part of our work. What I wanted to do was avoid making recommendations or suggestions. What you saw was we coined it as points of consideration. So would you like for the staff, the team that's working on this, to maybe come up with some proposals or some points for you all to consider? We did not want to drive. We were on the phone saying, take that out because you're telling them or you're making recommendations, but did want to bring that forward today as an option for us to look at the data, which we have been intimately involved in doing, and making some suggestions or some little stronger points of consideration, you review it. Yay, nay, well, maybe let's look at it this way, team versus this.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
We kind of did that before.
Right.
But I also think that we should identify kind of key guiding principles that superintendent and staff have previously identified, but also that the board has identified as well. The board is in a unique position in that we're not in the weeds of looking at all this data, managing the buildings day to day, but we're in the political positions of getting input from other municipalities, from developers, from parents and kids that go to our schools. So we kind of have some input on those types of issues that that staff may or may not be aware of. I'm sure they're aware of a lot of them. But there's some key points that we've identified consistently over the last couple of years, like being more efficient with our square footage costs, west side growth and worrying about what that looks like, but at the same time not overdeveloping, being aware of populations, ebbs and flows. So historically, Savannah, the city itself, was densely populated, and then there's been a flight out to the suburbs, but there's also a repopulation initiative as well. So, you know, where are we in that wave? And we don't want to sell every piece of property we have in city proper only 15, 20 years later to not have enough space. So we have to be mindful of decades-long trends as well. And I think some of those issues have been identified in some of the bullet points from previous retreats. But conceptually, let's all identify kind of the same goals that we're working towards, and based on those, here are some of the recommendations from superintendent and staff for the board to kind of work through. And then we can work through some of that at this retreat and at future retreats or in small group meetings like we've worked through East Blost and other issues as well. But I think having a timeline in place, kind of big picture timeline, so we all are working towards the same goal, getting kind of a final draft report to then discuss by X date would be helpful as well.
Okay.
Ms. Grabowski?
Great points. And as we're going through, and definitely, you know, hearing from the staff is critical on your recommendations. I'll, again, echo my request, or I'm sure this happens, but making sure that academic affairs is a part of that review and looking at those kind of opportunities that may not, you know, with the building data, it's very objective, as it should be. But what are those kind of more subjective opportunities that we can see from our other departments as a part of that? And then also, I was glad to hear Mr. Feliciano mention looking at data or record storage in collaboration with Chatham County, especially on the administrative side, where we have opportunities to be able to look at partnering with other local governments and other public sector partners. Obviously, I think that's a win-win all the way around. So look forward to hearing what those recommendations are, and thank you for all the hard work that's gone into this.
Yeah.
Ms. Hall?
I want to be sure that we keep the public informed, Ms. Kegler, about what we're doing. We know about the fiasco that happened in Atlanta when all of a sudden the public was made aware of the deplorable conditions at some of the places and what that led to. Our public is very interested in what we're doing all the time, and it would certainly help us, I think, to let them know that we're doing this facilities assessment, that we're very in tune with trying to become more efficient and that kind of thing. Let's get our communications team to keep that out there in the public view so that they see that all of these buildings across this 426 square area are under consideration by us, and that we're attuned to doing something about it.
All right. Any other, Dr. Howard-Hall?
Although it wasn't a recommendation, I was glad to see the considerations for 208 Bull Street, because I've always been very concerned about the footprint there. You know, that's an entire block of property, and although the building is not in the best condition, the location itself is very valuable. So I was just excited to see the consideration of options for that.
And that's what we're gonna do. We're looking at all of our properties, we're looking at, and certainly, as Ms. Grabowski said, how, there has to be a marriage between the operations, facilities, and academics. So this was one of the single topics that Dr. Watts allowed me to bring forward to cabinet. We'll continue to have that collaboration, getting data, got good notes, pulling the minutes, making sure that everybody who may not be in attendance today will have that information. So this is ongoing planning and being able to develop that schedule and working backwards from what that ultimate date should be.
All right, we don't have an announced CSE meeting coming up, but we'll have one between now and at least the end of the year, if not more. But we'll wait on scheduling that until we delve more into the information being gathered at the retreat and then kind of timeline planning with Dr. Watts and Ms. Miller-Kegler. So stay tuned for an announcement at some point about our next meeting. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Thank